Now moving to the empirical formula. The empirical formula is the simplest formula that represents the simplest whole number ratio of atoms in a compound. For example, hydrogene's molecular formula is N2H4. We can obtain the empirical formula by dividing the molecular formula by 2 to obtain the simplest ratio. By that, we get the empirical formula of hydrogen to be NH2. Another example. Glucose molecular formula is C6H12O6. The empirical formula is also the simplest ratio, which is CH2O. Now moving to ionic formula. For most ionic compounds, the ionic formula is the same as the empirical formula. It is the simplest ratio of atoms. For example, sodium hydroxide has the ionic formula NaOH. Notice, this is the simplest ratio of atoms. We can calculate the atomic ratio by switching the valence of anions with the cations. For example, aluminium is a trivalent and oxygen is divalent. The aluminium oxide formula is Al2O3. Another example is potassium sulfate. Potassium is a monovalent and sulfate is a divalent. The ionic formula of potassium sulfate is K2SO4. Another example is a zinc chloride. Zinc is divalent and the chloride ion is monovalent. The ionic formula of zinc chloride is ZnCl2. Notice, we don't usually write 1. For inorganic compounds, the molecular formula is mostly the same as the empirical formula. For example, ammonia has a formula NH3, but it can be different. For example, oxalic acid molecular formula is H2C2O4, and its empirical formula is, if we divide the whole molecular formula by 2, we get the empirical formula, which is HCO2. For organic compounds, most organic compounds have molecular formulas different from their empirical formulas. For example, ethene molecular formula is C2H6. We can obtain the empirical formula by dividing the molecular formula by 2. For that, the empirical formula of ethane is CH3. Nevertheless, some organic compounds have the same molecular formula as the empirical formula. For example, formic acid. It has a formula CH2O2. For ionic compounds, they have ionic formula, which is similar to the empirical formula. For example, sodium chloride, NaCl.